My name is Ethan Chazin. I'm an organization development coach, and welcome to Chazin-the-Dream. Today is a very, very special episode. We are going to have a representative from the online e-commerce play Chewy join us in the studio. Chewy is dedicated to supplying pet meds, food, treats, and health products. A few fun facts about Chewy. Their mantra is, with Chewy, no one pet parents alone. And after being founded in 2011, they've grown to an organization in excess of 20,000 people. And they make available through their online platform 3,500 brands. They've achieved a significant level of growth. Just from 2019 to 2022 alone, they achieved an annualized aggregate revenue growth of 28%. They have plans in the coming years to expand internationally. And a little bit more about Chewy on a personal note. We, my family and I, for 13 years, relied on Chewy to provide all of our pet needs for my baby, my terrier, Molly. So again, today is a very special episode of Chazin-the-Dream. And without further ado, I invite to the program Thomas Herdtner, who is the Vice President of Human Resources at Chewy. So excited today to have Tom Herdtner, Vice President of Human Resources, joining us on Chazin-the-Dream. Welcome to the program, Tom.
Ethan, thank you so much. It is absolutely awesome to be here with you today.
Just to be clear for our audience, you heard correctly, awesome.
That's right. And I'm just going to apologize in advance because that will absolutely not be the only pet pun that enters this conversation today, I'm sure.
I sure as heck hope it's not. So again, you and I had spoken before, and I just can't begin to tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the program. And I'd be remiss if I didn't right out of the gate say congratulations on being recognized by Fortune as one of the world's most admired companies in 2023.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's something we're really proud of, and it actually fits perfectly just into this conversation today too, because there's been a lot of thought, obviously, that's gone behind thinking about how do we sort of duplicate what we want to do for the external customer internally as it relates to culture and engagement. And it's really nice to see that recognition, especially since a lot of that's driven by your internal team members providing input as well toward those types of awards. So thank you very much.
No, not at all. And it's interesting because you touch on a subject we've talked about before, which is that you don't at Chewy treat your employees differently than your clients. You kind of see a holistic universe of people. And it's one of your missions to treat everybody phenomenally. And that's one of the things I picked up and why I was so excited to have you on this podcast, which is really a program dedicated to culture. And so I wanted to ask you something. So
yes,
Chewy launches 2011. Last decade plus, you've grown phenomenally in terms of now being in excess of 20,000 people. And something that you said to me resonated, where you talked about a singular focus that you have in personalizing each employee's experience. And that was so meaningful to me. I was just hoping you could share a little bit more about that.
absolutely. I'd love to talk about that. And I wish I could come right out of the gate and say I had this all figured out from day one. But welcome to the School of Hard Knocks, right? And no, it's interesting. Chewy has kind of stepped through that time warp that you talked about, partially, because of the pandemic and the move to e-commerce that many people did during that time frame and then beyond. And so it forced us to have to sort of think about engagement and culture at scale very quickly. And another big step for us was taking some of our bread and butter areas, example, customer service that does obsess around the customer
Right.
and the experience for the customer. And we actually moved that 100% virtual. So we have sort of a lot of growth going on, a lot of change going on in those areas that are critical for us around wowing our external customer. And this whole sort of idea of how do you actually continue to engage in a way that's equivalent for your internal team member when there's just so much change going on was right at the forefront of what we were thinking about, and not just in HR, but as a business. And a lot of our business leaders were looking for help on navigating through that and thinking about it. And I remember I was sitting there one day, and it was actually I was in the office for an event, and there were just a couple people in the office. We were still kind of coming out of the pandemic, and I remember sitting there and having this moment where I realized that we had been struggling to really sort of crack the nut on how do we create that differentiated experience in the midst of so much change, and just a lot of uncertainty that was going on and a lot of growth all at the same time. And I remember sitting there thinking, at some point you have to say the stuff, the things, the programs, the tools that you've used or historically used or that I've used just in my own career that have been successful don't work in an environment that's very different or fundamentally is changing. And that was a powerful moment. It was sort of the big epiphany moment, right? Of realizing and giving myself permission, I think, too, to sort of say it's okay to throw out what's always worked or what you're used to doing and go back to the drawing board and say, how do we create a differentiated experience in a very different environment? And
I just want to jump in. I want to jump in because I've been involved in and known so many organizations that didn't have that maturity or that kind of introspection to say that. So what were some of the things, just out of curiosity, that you said, what got us here isn't going to get us there, and you were kind enough to share, you put it aside?
Absolutely. So one example was historically when we had thought of engagement, and I'll talk a little bit about kind of our customer service and call center environment, just to use an example.
Right.
We had created an environment and an experience for those individuals in the center itself. And, that involved a lot of kind of forethought on how do you create energy? How do you create connection? How do you create belonging? And all of a sudden, when you take that physical presence and that building away, and now you have geographically dispersed individuals who are from home, you can't build the same level of excitement and energy in the same ways anymore. And so, it was funny because one of the reasons why I kind of had that moment where I realized we've got to just fundamentally switch the game up was I had talked to a team member in our customer service setting earlier that day. And she told me, she just said, Thomas, I don't feel like I'm as connected or as intricately, sort of part of the team as what I was in the past. And ironically, for this individual, she hadn't had a lot of change. There wasn't a new leader. There wasn't a lot of new processes. There wasn't a lot of new tools she had to interface with. The environment just had fundamentally shifted. And she said the comment, I wish I could go back to the days when we have that same level of energy. And, you talk about knife to the heart moments, right? Remembering some of that myself. And so I think that partially got me to that moment of realizing, hey, we need to throw the rule book out a little bit and start over in how we think about that. And to get back to your original question, the answer that kind of came out of this moment was being willing to empower our leaders to have a personalized approach to how they approach leadership. It could be recognition. It could be linked to just engagement in general, how they think about tying the team together and building community and camaraderie within the team. And from that, my team developed a number of tools and resources specifically for leaders at critical moments that matter, as we call it, that allows for personalization to that team member. And when that happened, the magic started. People felt much more connected. They felt like people understood them. They felt like the types of things that they were receiving or what they were involved in resonated with them. And not surprisingly, we saw the metrics move too, right? Engagement scores went up, performance metrics went up, et cetera. And so that personalization piece was the big turning point for us.
And one of the things that I pick up on as you talk about making all of these tools and resources available for your leadership team is then giving them the opportunity or the autonomy to take advantage of those tools pretty much on an a la carte basis and pick and choose. And
yes,
here's what I'm struggling with is you're growing this organization. You've got more than 20,000 employees. You and I have talked about your plans to kind of grow and move into other markets in the coming years. How do you maintain that structural integrity, that flatness, so that you don't get all kind of large pyramid shaped, because you need that flat organization to allow that decision making for your leaders. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because to get there, we really have to kind of go all the way back to the earlier days at Chewy and really what our bread and butter is, kind of what our competitive advantage is. And when you think about, kind of our mission statement, it's to be the most trusted and convenient destination for pet parents and partners everywhere.
Right.
And what I like about that is there's a relatability factor, right? In terms of, Chewy wants to be there throughout the entire life cycle of the customer, right? If you own a pet, you know that there are highs and there's lows and there's everything in between. And Chewy wants to be that one center point you think of to be there with you, whatever phase of the journey is. There's a service or a product or a support component that can tie into that, regardless of whether it's a high or a low moment.
Yeah.
And so that really links back to early days when we said organizationally, we want to maintain an obsession on the customer. Every decision we make, how we think about our business and our model forward is all about wowing the customer, giving the customer a differentiated experience. And to do that, we realize the need to be able to have speed and decision making and being able to give autonomy deep into the organization. And just from pure structural components, we've approached that by making sure our structure stays relatively flat. But deeper than that, it's about the autonomy component that you're talking about. And so as we've scaled as an organization, that's been at the forefront of all of the decisions we're making in terms of how we build out teams or how we think about entering new markets or trying out a new product or service. It all goes back to, does it actually enhance that customer experience? And can we differentiate ourselves from that?
Right.
And also, is it something that is it something that we can move on quickly and give the autonomy for our team members to be able to respond accordingly, to be able to tie back into that customer experience component?
Yeah, you have shared with me previously the critical value that Chewy, from a culture perspective, places on your people through things like, you've used these words quite a bit: empowerment, autonomy, engagement. So here's my question for you is, how do you consistently think about developing a really, really strong client-focused workforce? I mean, you had mentioned to me before the notion of reimagining career pathing, and then you talk about Chewy University and Chewtopians. How is that employee development such a central core value?
Definitely. So there's a few things that we've done in that space. And one thing that I would say a lot of this originates too is we've also really valued keeping things simple. So as we've thought about building out culture and creating an environment for team members that is differentiated, that has, keeping it simple and focused and tied back to that camaraderie that I talked about earlier of being a pet owner related to a pet owner, has been at the forefront of that. And a piece of that is, of course, giving people the ability to develop and grow and thrive. And so there's been a lot of intentionality on how we think about career pathing, growth, development, self-learning in the organization. So it's been about building a suite of resources and tools that team members can access both from a self-service standpoint, but then also leaders can also tap into as well. So some simple examples of that is, you mentioned Chewy University. We stood up Chewy University. In fact, we just celebrated the 1-year anniversary of that not long ago, which was crazy. It's been a year. But it's also been neat to see how content has grown and developed in that space. So, of course, you launch a platform, you have some critical components that tie to your culture or performance or values or operating principles, as we call them, that help people relate to what's important to Chewy. But what we've seen is individuals over time have said, hey, these are things that are really critical to the journey of helping you be successful here, or grow and expand the skill set that we know you need to develop into some other roles. Mm-hmm. And the content has built out around that, which has been really neat. So in essence, we've created this platform that has critical learning that we want everybody in the organization to have, but it's also developed a very personalized, back to my personalized word, component of people saying, these are some critical things you need to be successful in different roles. And then we tie that into how we think about career planning and development. Of course, we have a lot of things that many companies do, competencies and job leveling guidelines and things like that are guidance points. But we've tried to take that a step further to say, how do you actually tie in real experience, real development, and give individuals the opportunity to sort of not just self-learn, but actually tap into resources that have been developed by others that have gone through that journey. And then, of course, that creates a sense back to community and belonging too, where people feel like they have a voice and can be part of that for the holistic Chewy, not just in their microcosm of the world. So it's kind of a couple things that we've done in that career planning space that is beyond just a standard one-on-one conversation about, hey, what do you want to do tomorrow? What do you want to do 5 years from now? It gets it much more personal.
So, one of the things when you talked about developing employees and kind of customizing the content, the training, the learning, one of the universal attributes of employees who want to grow and develop is the attribute of being lifelong learners. And I'm just curious the extent to which you work to identify those characteristics and qualities in people who their behaviors, their backgrounds match the Chewy culture, and how do you institutionalize that almost into the talent acquisition process?
Definitely. One of our sort of key values is innovation. Mm-hmm. And enabling an environment where people feel they have the ability to try, fail, and learn. And in fact, it actually enters, into some of our operating principles, our DNA around being willing to try things, develop things, foster a sense of healthy debate and innovation in the organization. And that extends throughout all levels. So, it's interesting too, because I know a lot of times people hear the word innovation, or there's a value of innovation in the organization, and there's a specific segment of the business that focuses on there, or perhaps it requires a more senior level in the organization to actually do something with that. But we encourage that at all levels and even try to build that in to the extent that we can. So even in our non-exempt hourly areas, I was talking about, our customer service, our call center environment, as we think about, non-productive time or time off the phones or out of email or chat, we've gotten very specific about how do you build in some of these engagement pieces we're talking about, including learning, including the ability to innovate and provide suggestions, or recommendations on how we can improve what we're doing and the things we have. And it's interesting. In fact, we have a platform called Chirp is the name of the there's another pet analogy coming in there, but Chirp is exactly intended for that. It gives every team member the ability to provide input, and then there's direct response to that. And we've seen a lot of our platforms build out from that. We also have an organization or a component called Culture Coop, which it does exactly what it sounds like. It's more than just getting people together and having a nice conversation about what could we do better to engage people. It's very much a solution oriented. Let's sit down and innovate and talk about how to get things even better for our team members. So back to the original question, we've really focused primarily on this value of innovation and pushing this forward and enabling that at all levels in the organization versus siloing that to maybe a business development group or a more senior level of individuals. And I can tell you, just the number of ideas that have become reality and actual products or services for us have originated right out of that. And how neat is that, right? To be able as a team member to say, like, I didn't just touch this, like I was able to fundamentally change this.
You talk quite a bit about, we can put aside voice of the customer for a moment, but the voice of your people. And you talk about how critically important it is for you to have that constant communication flow that kind of goes out to your people, but also comes back in. And I'm curious how you either incentivize or create or implement process around that constant feedback from your people, that not only are you hearing their ideas, but to the extent possible, you may even be kind of gathering them and figuring out how to implement all of that feedback directly from your people, because they're closest to the work, right? So that's
yes.
Just how do you kind of do that?
Yes, so there's a couple things specifically there. The first one is getting the right sort of level of accountability in our leadership areas around making sure that there is an environment that fosters innovation. And so kind of tying back to our operating principles for a moment, we've developed a couple of different programs. One of them is called Operating Principles in Action. Very simple, what it sounds like, but rather than just saying, hey, one of our values is customer first, or build trust, or build a high-performing team, there's a double click into that to say, as a leader, these are the types of behaviors, or these are the types of sort of markers we're looking for around indicating whether that actually is happening. And then we give the opportunity for individuals to be recognized through those programs that isn't just tied to performance evaluation, right? Because I think a lot of companies, results, behaviors, whether it's once a year or 4 times a year or whatever, fill in the blank.
That's
right.
It.
Sounds great, but that's it. Exactly. And so it's actually intentionally pulling it out of just performance evaluation and making that just part of the regular day-to-day. Sometimes it's tied to recognition. Sometimes it's tied to, coaching, not in a negative context, but here's how you can be even more effective. Sometimes it's tied to the leader themselves. How do you build a better team or improve engagement on your team? So there's a direct tie there. And those programs, again, are built around more than just performance evaluation. A few other things that we do there as well. We're from a communication standpoint, we're very intentional and very vocal around, we want these things. We want to hear the voice of the customer. Here's ways you can be involved. Here's ways you can provide input, and then actually giving examples. So I think a lot of times I talk to people who have great programs in the organization around these things, but you never hear about what happens. And, heaven forbid we'd actually call out the name of the team member that came up with the idea, when we're actually saying what's happened. So there's intentionality on, we roll out a new program, like, these are the people who are directly involved. Where did it originate from? Celebrate that. Be willing to celebrate that, and make sure that communication is clear and crisp. And then the last thing I would mention too is we really value storytelling at Chewy. And it's interesting. I'll admit that before I got to Chewy, I'd heard some wonderful stories about this from other organizations, and I got to say, I was a little bit of a skeptic. We all enjoy a good story, right? Like there's no doubt about it. But can that actually connect people and spur people to do something differently? That's the big question, right? And one of the areas Chewy's focused on a lot in this area, just to share an example, is in the area of wellness and mental health. And particularly I'll talk about our customer service and our customer care areas. A lot of our customer service agents are talking to people every single day who have lost a pet. Yeah. And those are tough conversations, that weighs on our individuals. And we saw a need to invest in wellness and well-being for our team members. And so spending a little bit of time there and building out what that looks like. There was a storytelling piece, a heavy piece where someone had maybe struggled with anxiety around a call, or maybe it was even unrelated to work specific areas, but could become relevant in providing a customer experience. And it was interesting because you saw one person share. We were able to develop, some focus groups to help individuals through those different things. And all of a sudden, we're seeing people very clearly and openly share how they've worked through different things and come out on the other side stronger, more confident, able to perform better in their jobs. And it was great. It's like one of those things where you just kind of step back as a leader and let that happen, because there's a beauty in the relatedness of that. And that specific area for us where we've invested in wellness, there's been a heavy tie to retention, particularly in non-exempt hourly areas. So it's had an ROI and a payoff to that as well. So I'm a believer that sharing of experience and story and building a sense of community, even more so than already exists with people that just love pets and have pets, has been very powerful for us.
Yeah, I mean, the power of storytelling just mapped out to your people is just really interesting conversation. I guess this is all amazing stuff, Tom. I really appreciate you sharing your insights on Chewy. And I guess as kind of like a parting gift or parting kind of knowledge, I would ask you what you would want to accomplish in the coming years at Chewy for the organization, for its culture. What are some of the things that you're being very kind of cognizant of as you plan the future growth?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's a few areas for us that are particularly relevant right now. You share we're entering some new markets. We launched into Canada, so our first kind of non-US market this year. And so there's obviously many learnings that come along with that. But now it's thinking about how do you take some of the success that we've had domestically and build that into a global market, a global footprint. There's also some new areas and lines of business we're looking at. Same thing. Some of these we've been in before, some of them we haven't. How do we insert what's worked for us and been core for our culture into those settings? So for me right now, what am I thinking about and focused on is how do we duplicate that in some new markets and some new environments? And then secondly, again, as we continue to come out of just a time of explosive growth, we hired a lot of people right during that time frame that sort of never set foot in a Chewy office. And now as we're finding the right balance there in terms of sort of return to office and providing flexibility and figuring out how that makes sense. It's back to kind of what I started with. It's easy to sort of talk about culture and help somebody understand that when they can physically be there, they can see it, they can feel it, they can just digest that. So knowing that we continue to expand and we're going to continue to have virtual footprint, and there's areas where we've committed to stay that way as a business, how do we get even more crisp about helping people understand what that looks like and making sure they feel a sense of connectiveness and belonging that's given us a lot of the success up to this point. And then last but not least, we continue to obsess on how to wow the customer. The Chewy is not done. And you want to talk about a really cool group of people to talk to. Just the individuals that are sitting there like day after day trying to think about ways to just surprise and delight a customer. How do we take that and build that internally? Same thing. We're not done on the internal team member either. What are ways that we can do that that makes sense? All organizations have to think about things like cost. Imagine that. How do we do this in a way that makes sense for us, enhances the experience? It doesn't always have to be something that's costly. That balance and continuing to just obsess internally over our team members as we innovate more out for our external customers, tying that all together is the other big one. So those are kind of the big focus areas for me and for the team.
Tom, I'd be remiss if I didn't, just as we kind of wrap up our time together, just say thank you so much for sharing your kind of thoughts about culture and your almost pathological focus on serving the needs of your people and your clients. And here's to a phenomenal amount of future growth for Chewy. But as you've said a number of times today, growing the right way with a commitment and a focus on servitude. So I just really appreciate your time today. Hey, real quickly, if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to follow up with you?
Yeah, thank you for that. Absolutely love to just dialogue and back to innovation, hear thoughts and just engage in a good conversation. LinkedIn is probably the easiest place
We'll put
just
your
to
link.
connect.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I actually do answer messages in LinkedIn. So seriously, just just reference the podcast or reference Ethan, and I would absolutely love to chat and engage and look forward to it for sure.
Absolutely. You got it, Tom. So thanks for appearing on Chazin-the-Dream. So excited that you could spend some time sharing your thoughts on building a great culture there.